Hey people, and welcome back to the vlog. At first I want to say big thank you for 500 plus subscribers. We reached a small little milestone of 500 subscribers after my last video. Much appreciated and big thank you. Unfortunately, I didn't play any live poker the last 2 or 3 weeks and I had a lot of work to do, but I was in Amsterdam like 2 weeks ago and I played 1 session there. There's a 1-2 game running, the max buy-in is 250 euro and that's the amount I was in for, and it did not take long time until we pick our first hand. Let's hop right into the action, have fun. And when I say it did not take long time until we pick up our first hand, I mean it. We started the session at shortly past 9 and it's our first hand into the session and we pick up pocket kings. I'm in the hijack and there's 1 limp before me before I raise it to 10. We get immediately action because the cutoff player behind me 3-bets to 30. It folds around to me, and since I'm out of position and it's the first hand, I don't know anybody of the players here and of course nobody knows me. I want to keep up the aggression here. I 4-bet to 90. The cutoff goes into the tank here and he is in for 250 euro as well. I'm a little scared. Maybe I run kings into aces here in our first hand in Amsterdam, but after some time the cutoff decides to fold and we take down the first pot of the night and the first hand of the night. Off to a good start. Hope we can continue like this. Only 10 minutes later we pick up 5-4 of diamonds in the cutoff. There are 2 limps before me and I don't want to limp this hand. I want to play aggressive, so I raise to 12. There are 3 callers and we see a flop 4 ways and the dealer rolls over king, king 8, rainbow. All 3 players before me check to me, and since this board is so dry and most of the time I have a strong king here in this case, I decide to c-bet, but only for 22. That play didn't go as planned because 2 of my opponents decide to call and only 1 player get out of the way, and we have 3 ways now to a turn, and it brings the 4 of hearts. The 4 of hearts brings in a backdoor flush draw, and at least we have a pair right now, but I don't feel very comfortable with my bottom pair, and after they check to me I decide to check back this time. We see the 3 of hearts on the river that completes the backdoor flush draw, and now the under the gun player who limp called pre leads for 40 on this card. The player between us decides to fold, and yeah, we sit here with a very weak hand. I don't think we can call here like almost ever, and that's the reason why I decide to fold my hand as well, and we go on to the next one. We pick up a lot of playable hands in the first minutes of play, and only 5 minutes later we pick up ace king offsuit in the hijack. This time the under the gun player raises to 6, there's no limping this round, and the +1 player immediately 3-bets to 22. The player before me decides to fold and I recognize the +1 player only has 90 euro total effective. I have absolutely no problem to get it in here with ace king for this stack size, and that's the reason why I 4-bet again the second time in only 20 minutes, this time to 70. As expected, and also luckily for us, the under the gun player gets out of the way and the +1 player immediately jams for his remaining stack of 90. Of course I snap call and we see a run out, no more action. We actually decide to show our hands and my opponent shows us ace queen offsuit, so we just need to fade a queen here on the board, and that's what we do. The dealer rolls over 10, 7, 5. The turn brings an 8 and the river brings another 10, so we scoop in the nice pot here and we are off to a very good start now, and yeah, still hope we can continue like this. On to the next one. In the next hand we are on the button with ace 10 offsuit. There are 3 limps before me and I definitely want to punish them. I raise this pot up here for sure, this time for 16. 2 of them actually decide to call 16, the early position and the hijack player. So we go 3 ways to a flop of ace 7 5 with 2 clubs. So we flop top pair, decent backdoor opportunities, and both of them decide to check to me. I definitely c-bet this board here. This time I bet 30. The early position player wastes no time and calls this bet, and the middle position player, who is very short, is all in for his remaining stack of 16. So there is a side pot going between the early position player and me, not a big one, but things can get spicy. We see a very beautiful 4 of clubs on the turn, so we improve to the nut flush draw, belong to our top pair, and my opponent in the early position decides to check to me again. It's at that point I recognize my opponent only has 120 behind. Not even a pot size bet, and I think there's only one play here. I want to keep up the aggression, so I put my opponent all in for his remaining 120. He doesn't think for too long again, but this time he decides to fold, and we see a river with no more action, and the dealer rolls over the 8 of spades. I turn over my hand pretty confidently, but unfortunately our opponent in the middle position shows us king jack of clubs. So hit the second nuts. Unfortunately we cannot improve, but at least we pick up a small side pot and not so much time goes by until we pick up our next hand. Here we have king queen in middle position. We see a limp from the under the gun and the +1 player, and I decide to punish the limpers again, and this time I raise to 14. It folds back to the limper and both decide to call, and we see a flop 3 ways. The dealer rolls over queen 10-3 with 2 diamonds. They both decide to play in floor and check to me, and with my top pair, top kicker, I definitely c-bet this board. I bet 25. To my surprise, both of my opponents call. I mean, the board is pretty wet, there are a lot of draws available, but let's see a turn. The dealer rolls over the 5 of hearts, so a complete blank, and they both decide to check to me again. Both of my opponents are short. The under the gun player has only around 50 euro left, and the +1 player has even less. He has only about 35 euro total. So after they check to me again, I put it all in here. I bet 60 or 50 euro effective, and it doesn't matter because both of my opponents decide to mug their hand after I bet, and we scoop in the very nice pot. On to the next one. The next hand is an interesting one. We have pocket kings on the button, and again we see 2 limpers from the early position and the hijack. I definitely put in the raise here. I raise to 16. It folds back to the early position player who calls, and the hijack decides to call as well, and we see a flop 3 ways. Of course, when you have kings, the dealer puts out an ace, and also this time we see a flop of ace 5-4 with 2 diamonds. My opponents check to me as expected, and most of the time I should consider a c-bet here, but in this situation I decide to check back to my opponents, and we see the 8 of clubs on the turn. The early position still not likes this board and decides to check again, but the hijack now thinks that is a good card for him and bets 32. Since I showed weakness on the flop and underwrap my hand here for sure, I definitely have to call here at least once, and the good side fact is the hijack player is a very aggressive one. He got caught bluffing multiple times already, and I think I still could have the best hand here. The early position player gets out of the way, and we are only heads up now to a river, and we see the 10 of spades. The hijack don't wants to check, and of course he don't wants to fold. No, he keeps betting, and he sizes up to 54 now. Ugh, that's a pretty ugly spot. But let's check what is possible. At least the obvious front door flush draw bricked. A hand like 6-7 got there on the turn, which is possible, but besides that, not so much is going on this board. The hijack player is a very aggressive one, and he may thinks I showed weakness on the flop by not c-betting an ace high board, and may thinks I'm on a medium sized pair or maybe some Broadway cards, which he can definitely bluff out of the hand. And yeah, I don't love this spot, but I think sometimes you have to go with your gut here and even call with second pair versus such a player type. And in fact, after about 1 or 2 minutes of tanking, I decide to stick in the 54, and let's see what our opponent has. He doesn't really want to show at first, but then he shows the 5 of diamonds, which is followed by the 7 of diamonds. So I have to think about for a second, but I recognize I'm good here, so I turn over my hand and we scoop in this very nice pot with the hero call, if you want to call it like that, but to me it felt like a little hero call and feels pretty good. Let's hope we can continue like this. On to the next one. The next hand is definitely in this category.
What the fuck happened? What happened? What happened?
We are in the small blind with ace 4 of hearts. This time we see a limp from under the gun. The hijack decides to raise to 12. The cutoff and the button before me decide to call. In my opinion, ace 4 of hearts is a good candidate to 3-bet here. We have some good card removal and there's a lot of dead money in the pot to fight for, and I want to mix in some 3-bets as a semi-bluff as well, and this time I decide to 3-bet to 60. The under the gun limper folds, the hijack folds, and now things get a little weird. The cutoff, who only has 86 total, decides to go all in. It's getting even worse because the button behind him decides to cold call this 4-bet, and yeah, I have to call 26 euro more to see a flop 3-ways, and of course I'm committed here and I have to call the 26, but man, things got out of line and the pot got pretty big here because of my loose play. Let's see a flop. Already over 200 euro in the pot, and we see a flop of ace 9 7 with 2 diamonds. I'm first to act and I recognize the button only has 100 euro behind, and that's not even 50% of the pot, and if my opponent has a better ace, bunch chance to him, good luck, but there's no way I can fold for 100 euro more, so I decide to stick it in myself, and my opponent on the button snap calls us. So I'm not feeling pretty great. We only have top pair with one of the weakest kickers, but let's see a run out. The turn brings the 5 of diamonds, so the obvious front door flush draw got there, and the river brings the jack of clubs. We sit here with top pair, no kicker, but I turn over my hand first, and the button shows us pocket tens, so we at least win the side pot here. But even better news, the cutoff doesn't want to show his hand, and after a short time he mugs his hand, and somehow we win this massive pot.
Wait! What the fuck happened?
Nothing more to say to this hand. On to the next one. It's close to midnight before we pick up our next hand, this time queen 10 offsuit on the button. We see 2 limps from the under the gun and the +1 player before it folds to me, and I raise to 16. The small blind folds, but the big blind decides to call, and that invites the 2 limpers to call as well, and we see a flop 4 ways. The dealer burns and shows us king, queen, deuce, all clubs. We have the 10 of clubs by the way, so we have the 3rd nut flush draw, but nothing too exciting I guess. And all of my opponents decide to check to me. I think most of the time I should check this back here since we are 4 ways, but I feel pretty comfortable and I almost feel like I can't lose any hand, so I c-bet for 30. The big blind really considers his options for like 2 minutes and is already counting his chips. He has around 130 total and it looks like he really wants to go all in. But after that time he just decides to call. The under the gun player now gets out of the way, but the +1 player calls as well. So we are still 3 ways to a turn. And the dealer burns again and gives us a beautiful 10 of hearts. So we have 2 pair right now, still with our 3rd nut flush draw besides that. And both of my opponents decide to check again to me. As I said, the big blind player only has 100 euro left behind and the +1 player has around 130. So both of them again don't even have a pot size bet left in their stack. We improved to 2 pair now and I think at least one of them is drawing to a better flush and maybe the other one has a king. Since they are so short I think there's only one play here and that is to go all in for 130 effective, and that's in fact what I do. I put it in here and the big blind player gets out of the way immediately, but the +1 player, she really goes into the tank. She tanks for like almost 2 minutes but ultimately decides on a fold. I think by accident she exposes her cards and I'm pretty sure I saw her hand and she had ace 3 offsuit, but not in the way you think. She had the ace of hearts and the 3 of clubs. So she only had the lowest flush draw possible with the gut shot to her high card ace, and really unfortunately she doesn't find the call, but actually I think she just played with us. There's no way she can call the all in here with this kind of hand, but in the end we take this pot down, feels good, and let's go on to the last hand of the night. In the last hand of the session I want to go over, we are in the small blind with pocket tens. There's an early position limp as usual The hijack raises to 12 and the cutoff decides to call. The cutoff, by the way, is the player we caught bluffing with our pocket kings versus his 7-5 of diamonds, and by the way he was one of the 2 players in the massive all-in where we had ace-4 of hearts. Anyway, the button folds and I'm next to act, and I think pocket tens is a good candidate to 3-bet here since we see a late position open. Our hand should be good versus the big part of his opening range, and I squeeze to 52. The limper gets out of the way, the hijack gets out of the way, but of course our friend in the cutoff I mentioned calls. We see a flop of king 5-4 with 2 hearts. Definitely a board that should slightly favor our range, and I decide to c-bet, this time for 40. I think I make a little mistake here. I should c-bet a little smaller here, but as played I bet 40 and my opponent in the cutoff decides to call. We see the 4 of clubs on the turn, and I think in general this is a pretty good card for me. Anyway, I don't want to keep up the aggression here. I don't want to inflate the pot too much here, and that's the reason why I check to my opponent. My opponent don't want to check. Maybe he senses weakness or maybe he has a real strong hand, but he bets for 70. Because of the fact my opponent is a very loose aggressive player who can bet when he senses weakness, and of course there are some possible draws remaining that missed on this turn, I think I should call here at least one more time, and that's what I do. I stick in 70 as well, and we go to the last card. The dealer rolls over the jack of hearts. I think that is one of the worst cards in the deck we can get, and even versus this type of opponent I don't think I want to put more money here into the pot, and that's the reason why I check to my opponent. I really hope he wants to check back, but unfortunately for us he keeps betting, and this time he sizes up to 120. I really consider a call here for a short time, but I think even though he is a loose opponent I can pick better spots versus him, and I let my hand go and fold. Unfortunately we lose a pretty big one to the end of the session, but let's go on to the session update. So yeah guys, I had a great time in Amsterdam and this session completes it all. I cashed out for 615 euro, and before that I was in for 250 euro. That makes a profit of 365 euro. Feels great to keep the win streak going, and yeah, if you enjoyed the videos, please leave a like and subscribe under the channel. Much appreciated, and yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one and see you in the next one. Goodbye.